Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and this is my review for Star Trek Lower Deck Season 3, Episode 9, Trusted Source. This video will be full of spoilers if you have not seen up through the end of this particular episode, so you are now warned. I had to put aside my expectations after watching this episode and think about how I feel about this episode without being a victim of my own expectations. I talked about last week that there's a lot of hanging threads I'd like to see them address. There's a couple of them that I won't be surprised if they just wait till season 4. In fact, at this point, I would say they're definitely waiting till season 4 to address them. One being the Rutherford backstory. We got some more into that mystery earlier in the season. And then also what we got last week with William Boimler joining Section 31. That one I just fully expect to be held on to season 4. But also, I got the impression last year after the episode Wage Douche that we would see that Vulcan character again. And I really would like to see that. And I don't know at this point if we're going to, unless they bring her in next week to replace Mariner, because she is kind of the Vulcan Mariner. I don't know. So they could do that. I don't know. What was her name? I should look up her name before I go on these reviews and start recording. I just want to say T'Pring, but it's not T'Pring. Why do all Vulcan women, they have names that start with a T apostrophe? Like, I feel like every single Vulcan woman, that's what their name is. Anyways, so I have to put all that aside. Also, the fact that the previous 2 episode 9s have been something unique and different. Season 1, we got the first crisis point, and then season 2 we got Wage Douche, and this was more of a straight up Lower Decks episode, which is fine though. That's fine. I did have some expectations that they might do something different, but that's okay. Now with all that put aside, I think I come out feeling mostly positive about this episode. I will say that it made me laugh a lot more than I expected it to. I felt like there was a lot of laugh out loud moments all scattered all throughout this episode. And it was a really strong character story, particularly exploring the relationship between Carol Freeman and her daughter Beckett Mariner. And this is something that was never resolved. The last time they explored this relationship was in episode 1, and it ended with Captain Freeman reaming out Mariner, telling her that she's going to put ransom on her ass, and ransom is going to be, on top of her, which is something they did continue throughout the season, though it did look like Ransom was kind of learning to respect Mariner in recent episodes. But Captain Freeman wasn't. He probably didn't report back to her on that. So that all tracked with me. That all made sense. That is something that I think did need to be explored more, because they never really resolved that. So I'm okay with them going in that direction. I do have some critiques, though, particularly the framing device of how they explored this relationship, but I'll get more into that in the heart of this review. So I'm going to do this one a little differently. Usually I do like A plot, then B plot, and C plot, but there was really just one A plot in this episode, so I think what I'll do is I'm going to start with the positives, the things I really enjoyed about this episode, and then I will get into my critiques of the episode. Okay, so there were a lot of things I really liked about this episode, and as I mentioned before, there were a lot of laugh out loud moments, and I'll just give a couple of examples. I know that later on I'll watch my brother's review or someone else's review, and they'll mention something that's really funny, and I'll go, oh, I should have mentioned that in my review. I forgot about that one. That was hilarious. There's a lot of things, just trust me on that one, that I found really funny. But a couple of examples that are just sticking out in my mind is earlier in the episode where they were upset about the pie eating contest being canceled, and Rutherford was pressing that the lieutenant dude who was telling them the pie eating contest was canceled, and he was like, "Please, I've been starving myself," and then he just rips off his shirt and goes, "Stun me!" And the other guy is like, "I can't." It was so funny. Just because they were making such drama out of a pie eating contest, which is just a silly concept and really perfect for this episode. So that was good. And then I cracked up when Captain Freeman leaves the bridge and says, "Dr. Bigliaboo, you have the con." And his first course of action is, "Mr. Boimler, send out a subspace communication to Mimi." And then when Freeman comes back there on the view screen, there's this elderly bird lady like knitting something. And then he goes, "Mom, don't call me when I'm on the bridge." That really cracked me up. And there are a lot of moments like that throughout the episode. As I said, I'm sure that someone else on another review will mention one. I'll be like, "Damn it, I should have mentioned that in my review too," because I did find myself laughing a lot in this episode. The other thing I really appreciated is that they did explore this idea of the fact that Starfleet ships in so many Star Trek episodes change the course of a society and then ditch them and never go back again. So what do they call it? The swing around? I thought that was funny that they decided to explore this concept. And it's a little disappointing, though, that they ended up going to a planet where, yeah, everything's fine, you know? They went back to an obscure episode from the first season of The Next Generation's Symbiosis, where they explain the plot, which is good because that might be a reference that some people don't get. So they kind of... Or maybe you haven't seen it in a long time, you don't really remember it, because who goes back and watches the first season of The Next Generation? My God, that season sucked. So you might not really remember the plot of that episode. So I'm glad that they kind of laid it out for you, but a little disappointing that everything was good, because there are so many examples of planets that they could go to where things would definitely not be good. I mean, well, Captain Freeman mentions one. I forget the name of the planet, but she's like, "Oh, I'm sure they're back with Landru again." The whole Landru thing cracks me up, which they did visit that planet in a previous season. I think that was in Crisis Point, or it was at the end of season 1. In any event. But anyways, there are several planets that they could go to that probably would be a disaster. Why don't they go to the planet from The Apple, the original series episode, where Kirk completely ignores the Prime Directive and changes this society's entire way of life and then just leaves. That was kind of one of the worst. So they should go back to that planet. That would be a disaster, I'm sure. But there's so many examples of that all throughout Star Trek. I mean, the entire film, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, could have been avoided if somebody just checked up on Khan at any point. So I love that they decided to explore this idea. Now, lastly, in the positive category, I do want to talk about what I referenced at the start of this video, which is that relationship between Captain Freeman and her daughter, Mariner. Now, as I said, this is something that I do think they needed to follow up on, as that was how we started the season, with Captain Freeman reaming out Mariner and putting ransom on her ass. And this episode shows that Captain Freeman just doesn't trust Mariner. And we have seen as an audience, and I think the other Beta Shift people, the other main characters, have seen as well, that Mariner actually has grown as a character. But Captain Freeman is just not seeing it and is still viewing her through the lens of this rebellious daughter who doesn't do what she's told, does whatever she wants, and she'll never change, which is completely unfair. And I think that that's pretty common in a parent and daughter or son relationship, where the parents often will have a hard time seeing that their kids have gotten better, have evolved, have matured, have changed, and they will always view them through the lens of the person that they were when they were younger. And not just parents. I think siblings can do that to each other. I think even friends can do that to each other. But it's a very common dynamic between parents and their children. And so it's interesting to explore it here. Now, in my critique section, I'm going to talk about how they did it, and I have some complaints, some critiques about how they went about this. But putting that aside for now, I do like this general idea that they did explore this relationship, and I like that Captain Freeman felt like a fucking idiot because she should. And frankly, I don't think that Mariner should listen to her when she goes back to her and grovels and apologizes. I think Mariner should be like, fuck you, you should have trusted me. Now I'm gonna go off with this hot archaeologist chick, and we're gonna have archaeology adventures together, and so fuck you. And I think that should be Mariner's response. But I also want her to be back on the show again. I want her to be back on the show, not just doing side quests with the archaeologist chick, but to actually be on the show and the Cerritos. I think the thing that will probably get her back will be her friends Boimler, Tendi, and Rutherford. And I think the relationship with her mom is going to have to be repaired over time. I wouldn't want to see that just instantly be fixed. Like, I think that's something that still needs to be worked on in future episodes. And Lower Decks is pretty good about doing that, so I have faith that they would do it that way. So I do want Mariner back on the show, so hopefully her friends are able to appeal to her. But as far as what Mariner should say to her mom, it should be like, fuck you, you need to recognize that I've changed, you fucking bitch. Like, I really, I think that she should do that. So anyway, I did appreciate all of that stuff about the episode. Now let me get into some of the things I didn't appreciate as much. Okay, so the FNN news. I have a problem with them using that as the framing device. I have a problem with the existence of FNN news, and this actually started in Star Trek Picard. I think that's the first time that we saw it. I don't remember before that, where the first episode of Star Trek Picard season 1, where he has that interview with I don't know if it even was called FNN News, but it was like some news reporter that Picard had. And I don't know, maybe this is the cynic in me, but mainstream news media is not a part of my utopian vision for the future, personally. And I can't, speak for Gene Roddenberry. He's obviously long left us. But I would have the feeling that it wouldn't be part of his vision either. Like, why would corporate media still exist in the 24th century when there's no money and it's hard-hitting reporters and unfairly reporting on people, the sensationalism, journalism? I don't see that existing in the context of the utopian future. So I just reject the entire concept of the FNN news. Now, I don't mind it being used in Lower Decks occasionally as a comedic device, like showing a little news report with a ticker running across the bottom of the screen with little funny jokes at the bottom, little Easter eggs at the bottom. That I don't mind so much, because Lower Decks, you do have to allow for some suspension of disbelief and some silly things like that just for comedic purposes, and I'm okay with that. So if they just showed FNN news on the background every once in a while just as a comedic device, I don't have a problem with that. But to really lean in on it and to show this reporter doing this investigative journalism, which is really sensationalized journalism, and trying to paint the crew in a bad light, I don't like that, and I don't think that would exist in the 24th century. So I had to really kind of get past that to get any enjoyment out of this episode. And obviously, I did still get a lot of enjoyment out of this episode, but I had to really overlook that I just hate this framing device that they use with the FNN news. So there's one other thing that really bothered me about this episode, and though overall, as I just talked about a couple minutes ago, I did really enjoy that they explored this relationship between Mariner and Freeman, and that I do feel it was necessary, and I do feel that this outcome made a lot of sense given what we had seen before. But how we get there does bother me. Besides the news network, the other thing that really bothers me is the twist. It's one thing that it was super obvious. I mean, it was the most obvious thing in the world. It didn't fool anyone. Everybody watching this, I'm sure, knew with 100% certainty that Mariner said nice things and that she didn't really do anything wrong, and that it was really just the other crew members dropping some nuggets of information. I mean, that was so obvious. Now, that part I can live with. And I can even live with the whole miscommunication thing. Like, you could almost put this in the category of, well, this could have been solved if Mariner had said one thing. But I don't think so, because she tried to tell them that she said she didn't do anything wrong, and they weren't listening. And at that point, I could understand being frustrated and going, well, fuck you, then I'm not going to explain it anymore, because if you won't listen to me, then why should I even waste my time? And I do feel like if she did get into more specifics about what she said, they wouldn't believe her. So, and the fact that like Freeman cuts her off and doesn't even allow her to do that, that all tracks with me. That is not my problem. My problem is that it's so telegraphed that Mariner is definitely going to go and say bad things about the Cerritos, because she's like, oh, I'm going to tell them the truth. I am so sick of this fake stuff, and I'm going to go tell them the truth. Like, she kept saying, I'm going to tell them the truth, and she was being vindictive about it. And then all of a sudden, she goes and tells them, oh, this is the best place I've ever been. You don't say, oh, I'm going to tell them the truth, and then go, oh, this is my home. That's bullshit. That was an intentional misdirect for a twist that everybody saw coming. So it really bothers me that they tried to misdirect us into thinking, oh, Mariner's going to go tell them the truth, when it was obvious to everyone that, of course, she said nice things. So that part really bothered me. Last point to touch on before I get into my rating. This is neither positive or negative. It's just something I want to track. This Texas class ship, these automated ships, it made me think of the original series episode. Oh, why am I blanking on the name of that episode? The one, the Ultimate Computer, where they were gonna, make crews obsolete and turn over to computers. But that was a sentient AI, and this is more, just an automated ship. I'm curious to see where they're going with this, because we've seen in Star Trek Picard, there doesn't seem to be Texas-class ships flying around anywhere. It doesn't seem to be a thing. So I do like this idea. I am curious where they're going with it. So I just wanted to throw that in before I give my rating. Now I am free to give my rating out of 10. So my rating out of 10, with 1 being the lowest possible score, 10 being the highest possible score, for Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 9, is an 8. I'll give it an 8. Definitely not the best episode of the season, and definitely not the best episode 9 by any stretch. Definitely third place in the episode 9 department. But I still got a lot out of it. Despite my critiques, I laughed a lot in this episode. And I did like that they explored the Freeman and Mariner relationship, even if I didn't always like how they got there. So I'm going to give it a solid 8 for this episode, and still an overall very strong season of Lower Decks. Okay, please join me next week one more time for the finale. We'll see what the finale will bring us, and if you have not already, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, do all that wonderful stuff, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.